Hello, boys and girls and babes. Welcome back to the Janae Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. So, today, very exciting day today. Today was actually the first official day of training camp as the NHL officially moves into Phase 3 of its 4-phase return to play plan. So Phase 3, as we know, formal training camp. So today, like I said, was actually the first official day of training camp for the Caps and for many other teams around the league as well. And for the Caps part, for Phases 3 and 4, they have released the names of the 34 players who are on their roster. And it's an expanded roster due to the uncertainty of everything during this era of COVID-19. And so each team in the league is allowed to carry some extra players on their roster. So it's 20 forwards, 10 defensemen, and 4 goaltenders for the 24 teams that are taking part in the restart plan. So for the Caps, their 20 forwards are going to be Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, Evgeny Kuznetsov, TJ Oshie, Tom Wilson, Jakub Vrana, Lars Eller, Ilya Kovalchuk, Carl Hagelin, Nick Dowd, Garnet Hathaway, Richard Panik, Travis Boyd, Shane Gersick, Connor McMichael, Daniel Sprong, Garrett Pallon, Brian Pinho, Beck Malenstein, and Philippe Millette. Their 10 defensemen are going to be John Carlson, Brendan Dillon, Dmitry Orlov, Michael Kempney, Nick Jensen, Radko Gudas, Jonas Siegenthaler, Martin Feravari, Alex Alexeyev, and Tyler Lewington. And their 4 goaltenders are going to be some guy named Braden Holtby, Ilya Samsonov, Phoenix Copley, and Vitek Vanacek. And so when you look at this roster, this is actually very important information because we now know that no player on the Capitals is choosing to opt out of this remainder of the 2019-2020 season. We have seen a few players from other teams around the league deciding that they're going to opt out, that they're not going to play. But we know now for sure that no Capitals player is opting out. So it is something that I talked about a little bit previously, that I just didn't believe that any Caps players were going to opt out. And like I said, we know now for sure that is indeed the case. They all want to play. So for the first day of training camp, the Caps had it split into 2 groups today. So they had essentially 2 separate practice sessions, keeping it to smaller groups. So Group 1, which was the first group to hit the ice, consisted of Ovechkin, Backstrom, Kuznetsov, Wilson, Eller, Hagelin, Hathaway, Gersick, Pinho, Millette, Carlson, Dillon, Orlov, Siegenthaler, Holtby, and Copley. And then Group 2, which hit the ice a little bit later in the day, consisted of Oshie, Vrana, Kovalchuk, Panik, Dowd, Boyd, McMichael, Sprong, Pallon, Malenstein, Jensen, Gudas, Ferhavari, Lewington, and Vanacek. So you will notice that there's a few players missing there. 3 players to be exact, and those being Michael Kempney, Alex Alexeyev, and Ilya Samsonov, who all did not participate in the first day of training camp. And we don't know why exactly they weren't on the ice. We only know that they are on the 34-man roster, and therefore we know that they have not exercised their right to opt out of the return-to-play plan. So we can assume then that their absence today was related to either injury or illness. But this is something that I do want to talk about because it's going to become the norm playing hockey in the era of COVID-19. So you heard me say that we don't know why they weren't on the ice today. We can only speculate. And this is something that I want to emphasize a lot because during this era of COVID-19, anyone who tells you that they know why someone is not on the ice is lying. They're lying. And here's why. The NHL has given very strict instructions on how teams are allowed to deal with injury news because of COVID-19. And basically, the instruction is that they're not allowed to give any news. So teams will not be allowed to say anything other than that a player is unfit to play or unable to practice. And literally, I'm using quotations, as that is the exact language that the league has okayed for teams to use when discussing injuries, illness, absences from practices or games, whatever the case may be. That's it. That's all they're allowed to say. So it's unfit to play or it's unable to practice. And they're not allowed to elaborate or expand on it any more than that. So for a league that's already notoriously vague when it comes to injuries, almost always, especially during playoff time, simply stating whether it's an upper body or a lower body injury, they will now become even more vague, as they won't even be allowed to say whether it's an upper body or lower body issue. So essentially, reading between the lines, the league does not want us to know if an absence is related to COVID-19 or not, and so we won't know. We can only, like I said, speculate. So anything that you hear from anyone regarding injuries or suspected illness, it's simply speculation. And again, I want to stress that a lot because people tend to just kind of too easily believe everything that they hear or that they read online or whatever. So throughout these playoffs, when it comes to injuries and illness, it will all be speculation unless it is directly from the mouth of the NHL itself. So when it comes to Kempny, Alexeyev, and Samsonov, we don't know, but we can guess. So like I said, the one thing that we do know, because the 34-man roster has already been released at this point, is that they are not opting out. And in Samsonov's case, we saw him appearing in a TikTok video actually for Kuznetsov's daughter Asenia just yesterday, and he looked to be very uninjured as he was busting out a barrel of dance moves not seen since the 1980s, basically. So unless he's somehow become injured between then and now, then that's probably not the case either. Kempny and Alexeyev do both have a bit of injury history, but they've as well, both been seen back in DC and looking no worse for wear. And they would not have been included on the 34-man roster if they had any type of serious injury at the moment. So whatever it is for all three of them, it's probably just precautionary at this point. And when we look at the Caps 34-man roster for these playoffs, by the way, obviously all of the regulars in the lineup from this 2019-2020 season are there. So that's Ovechkin, Backstrom, Kuznetsov, Oshie, Wilson, Vrana, Eller, Kovalchuk, Hagelin, Dowd, Hathaway, Panik, Carlson, Dillon, Orlov, Kempny, Jensen, Gudas, Siegenthaler, Holtby, and Samsonov are all there. So that's obviously really good news. But when we look at the extra additions to the roster, because like I mentioned, it is an expanded roster that's being allowed by the NHL due to the uncertainties surrounding COVID-19. And so you're allowed 34 guys on your roster for these playoffs. And for the Caps, there's some really intriguing names there. Obviously, a guy like Travis Boyd is a frequently used extra by the Caps anytime someone gets injured, and we already know he's a very good player capable of stepping right in and not missing a beat. So good to see him there. And then the same goes for the youngster Martin Feravari on defense. He played some really good games for the Caps this season as they wanted to get a look at him. And he's proven he's ready for the NHL anytime. So it's very nice seeing him on the expanded roster as well. That gives you a lot of confidence in case someone does fall ill or get injured on the back end. And then the other two names that I really want to draw attention to here are Connor McMichael and Alex Alexeyev. For Alexeyev, he's a massive kid with an NHL body and NHL talent. And the Caps' first-round pick in 2018 is projected to be a top pairing defenseman at the NHL level. He's good on offense. He's good on defense. He's physical. He's got all of the tools, really. And with John Carlson already having been signed to an 8-year extension after the Caps Cup win in 2018, it is very possible that Alexeyev ends up being Carlson's D partner somewhere down the line here. So this is a kid that I really like having on the expanded roster for the playoffs. The Caps do have a lot of depth on defense, but in Alexeyev you have a top-end talent, and so it gives you the option to plug him in if someone falls ill or gets injured, and just kind of, throw him to the wolves and let him show you what he can do, because quite often that is the best way to do things. Is just to throw the guy into the fire, because if he's a true stud, which I believe Alexeyev is, then he will thrive in that type of situation. And with Connor McMichael, everyone's heard of this kid by now, as he just absolutely lit up the Ontario Hockey League this season, scoring seemingly never-ending hat tricks and quite literally recording 2 points for every game that he played. He scored 47 goals and had 55 assists in just 52 games this season. And he was a plus 32 as well. So you could say the kid is pretty good, and he's an extremely well-rounded player as well. He was also amazing, really, in the World Junior Championship for Team Canada, playing against the world's best under 20 players. If you don't watch the World Junior Championship down there in the States, I know some of you do, some of you don't, but Connor McMichael, he scored 5 goals in 7 games, and frankly, as a Canadian myself who watches the World Juniors as if it is my religion, many of the goals he scored were of the massive variety, coming at times when Canada really needed a goal. So being, that he's a Caps draft pick and I'm a Caps fan, I was like a proud mama bear watching those World Juniors, gloating over how good her cub is at scoring big goals. And I kept on pretty much incessantly reminding my family members that McMichael is going to be a Washington Capital. So Team Canada, they won the gold medal, and they would not have won that gold medal without him, honestly. He was amazing. And the other thing that I really noticed about him during those World Juniors is that he is mature, like way beyond his years, and he's so cool under pressure. In fact, he seems to deliver even more the more pressure that he's under. So, and this is exactly why I think you could just throw him right into the NHL playoffs, and he'd not only do just fine, but he would likely make an impact. Now, with that being said, do I think the Caps are going to have him in their lineup when the playoffs start in August? No, I don't. But it won't be because he's not good enough. I just simply don't think that any of these additions to the expanded roster, whether it be McMichael or Alexeyev or whoever, I don't think any of them are going to start in the playoffs. I think the Caps were one of the best teams in the NHL all season long, and so they're at least going to start with that same lineup that got them there, right? If they're in a playoff series and something isn't working, then they'll change something. And with these additions to the roster, they have great options to do so if the need arises. But they were one of the best teams in the NHL all season long as constructed, so I definitely think they'll start with what they already know works. And especially in these playoffs, experience is going to be a big factor. Having a veteran team is a huge asset, even more so than usual under these unprecedented circumstances. And the Caps do have a veteran team. And so they're well suited for the uncertainty that these COVID-19 playoffs will bring. And so I'd be somewhat shocked if they chose to give one of the youngsters a spot in the lineup right away over a veteran player. But like I said, I think they will start with the lineup that brought them success all season long. And they'll lean on the experience in their veteran group. And I do think it will work and they'll do well. And if for whatever reason something's not working in any given series against any given team, then you can make a change. Having such capable guys waiting to step into the lineup is also a huge comfort, especially, like I said, with the uncertainty that these playoffs bring. God forbid if someone gets sick, or even if someone gets injured, it's a great insurance policy, if you will, having a Travis Boyd, having a Connor McMichael, having an Alex Alexeyev, having a Martin Ferravari, even having a Phoenix Copley, who's played an entire season in the NHL last season, and who played very well and won quite a few games for the Caps. You never know what's going to happen or which kinds of situations are going to arise, especially right now. And so you can never have too much capable backup, especially in times like these. So the Caps are fortunate in that they have a number of capable guys at every position who will be waiting and ready to go. And that should, like I said, serve them very well moving forward. Depth is always important in the playoffs, but even more so now with all of the uncertainty that surrounds this particular postseason. And so we've talked now about who's on the roster for the Caps for the postseason, who are the new guys, who's likely going to be in the starting lineup when the games get underway in August, barring anything bad happening. So I just want to take a few moments now to answer some questions that some of our fans have been sending in via email, via Facebook, via Twitter, etc. So one question that quite a few of you have been sending in has been whether or not I see any of these extra additions, the Connor McMichaels, the Alex Alexeyevs, etc., getting into the lineup for the playoffs. And hopefully I've answered that one already here in this episode. I don't see any of them starting out in the lineup, like I said. I think they're there as an insurance policy for now, in case something bad happens. But just to be clear, something bad doesn't have to be just a case of COVID-19 or an injury to a starter. It could also simply be that one of the regulars is playing poorly, or the team as a whole is playing poorly in a series, and so the coaches want to shake something up. That could be a situation where you see one of these guys get into the lineup and have a chance to make an impact. But yeah, to answer your question, guys, I don't think any of them will start in the lineup. They'll get in only if something is not going according to plan. They're there as insurance, basically, for now. But it's a pretty damn good insurance policy, like I said, when you have names like Connor McMichael and Alex Alexeyev on it. And another question that we've got from a few different fans here is, who do I think the Caps starting goalie is going to be for the playoffs? Well, Todd Reardon and his coaching staff have already answered that, and they've said it's Braden Holtby's job to lose, which is absolutely the right call, by the way. The guy has posted insanely good playoff numbers throughout his career. In fact, he's second among all goalies playing in these playoffs in career playoff save percentage, with a save percentage of .928. Which is simply ridiculous. The only guy playing in these playoffs who's got a better save percentage number is Ben Bishop with a save percentage of .929 in the postseason in his career. And Braden Holtby, by the way, has played twice as many career playoff games as Ben Bishop has, for what it's worth. So generally, the more games that you play, the harder that it is to keep up with a number like that. So overall, Holtby has the 6th best career playoff save percentage of all time in NHL history. And that's over 100 years of history, by the way. And again, of the 5 guys who are in front of him on that list, Holtby has by far played the most postseason games of any of them. The next closest is Tim Thomas. You might remember him. He has 51 career postseason games played. Holtby has 89 career postseason games played, and he could potentially pass the century mark for postseason games played in this year's playoffs, and being just 30 years old. So to have that many postseason games played and still be able to keep your save percentage at such an insanely high level, like I had mentioned, is simply incredible. So, he's won a Stanley Cup, the first and only one so far in Washington's history. So, really, what more do you want? And then another fan writes in and asks, which qualifying round series do you see producing an upset? Let me start off by saying that I see probably quite a few upsets happening, and some, I'm not even sure that you could class it as an upset, but it would be the lower seeded team defeating the higher seeded team. So sure, we'll call it an upset. But perhaps the one that would draw the most attention is I see the Columbus Blue Jackets defeating the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, people in the center of the hockey universe, as they like to call it, are going to hate hearing that from me. But, I just simply feel that the brand of hockey that the Blue Jackets play, which is a tough, physical, and defensively sound brand, is very conducive to beating a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have very little structure in their game and are very easily rattled. I think the Leafs are both physically and mentally a very weak team, and I also think the Blue Jackets have a huge advantage in the coaching department, where they have the veteran, battle-tested John Tortorella, and the Leafs have the still wet behind the ears, I'd rather be your buddy, not your coach, Sheldon Keefe. So I'm pretty confident that the Blue Jackets are going to pull off the upset here. And I will actually be putting my money where my mouth is as well, and placing a bet on the Jackets in this one. Again, I'm sorry to say it, Leafs fans. I know that you guys think that, the entire hockey world revolves around Toronto, but I don't think that other than Toronto being a hub city and all of these other teams continuing to play in Toronto throughout the playoffs, at least up until the conference finals, when it will all move to Edmonton. But I don't see the Leafs continuing to play for very long this postseason. So I do see the New York Rangers defeating the Carolina Hurricanes as well, as the Rangers seem to have the proper ingredients, if you will, to beat the Hurricanes, as they went 4-0 against them this season. And I know the Hurricanes were not happy about drawing this matchup. If you remember, actually, the Hurricanes were actually one of only 2 teams that voted against the NHL's return to play playoff format. With the other team, of course, that voted no, being the Tampa Bay Lightning. So the Hurricanes did not want a matchup against the Rangers. And I am inclined to believe that their fear is justified. So I think the Rangers win this one. Caps fans saw firsthand how great Artemi Panarin can be in the playoffs. And I do think that the Rangers coaching staff, if they know what's good for them, will see the light and start Henrik Lundqvist in goal, given that these will be playoff games, and he is, after all, Henrik Lundqvist. And even if they don't start Hank, or if he falters at all, they've got 2 other great goalies waiting to play as well, in rookie sensation Igor Shesterkin and Alexander Georgiev, both very capable netminders, so they do have options. And the Hurricanes have more questions than answers in net, and I, being a goalie myself, I always like a team that has their goaltending situation figured out. And then the other upset, if you can call it that, that I have in the Eastern Conference is that I definitely think the number 10 seeded Florida Panthers are going to take down the number 7 seeded New York Islanders. The Islanders really lack anything resembling scoring depth, and they were really, really, really struggling for a long time leading up to the NHL's pause on March 12th. If you look all the way back, they actually won only 19 of the 47 games that they played after November 23rd. So, they were really faltering for much of the season. And the Panthers, for their part, they were 6th in the NHL in scoring with 3.30 goals per game. And I think they'll just simply have more than enough to take down the Islanders. So if you're keeping score here, that is 3 of the 4 qualifying round series in the Eastern Conference that I think are going to produce upsets. Of course, the series that we all hope will produce an upset will be the Pittsburgh Penguins Montreal Canadiens series. And I think it is possible, if unlikely. Montreal would have to get some pretty great goaltending from Carey Price. And actually, a lot of the underlying numbers and advanced stats are actually in Montreal's favor in this series, as the Canadiens are actually a pretty damn good puck possession team. It's just that they have so much trouble with turning that puck possession into actual goals for. And of course, goals are what actually wins hockey games, unfortunately, for the Montreal Canadiens. And there is also a chance as well that one of the few guys on the Canadiens roster who actually can put the puck in the net, Max Domi, will not be able to participate in the playoffs because of his diabetes, unfortunately. And so if he doesn't play, they haven't decided yet, Domi and the Canadiens. They have not decided that yet. But if he doesn't play, then I think that pretty much effectively sinks Montreal's chances in this series, which were probably already pretty slim to begin with. I think that there is a chance that Montreal does it, and that's why I probably still will place a $100 bet on them in this series because the odds are great. And like I said, I think there's a chance that they can do it, but I wouldn't go betting your house or anything like that, and especially not if Domi can't play. So, however, like I said, I do see there being at least a chance that we could see a 4-for-4 sweep in the Eastern Conference, in which all 4 of the underdogs, if you will, the lower-seeded teams, defeat their higher-seeded counterparts to get into the Stanley Cup playoffs. So Wouldn't that be something? I, for one, will be rooting for it. That would be pretty incredible. And then in the Western Conference, the upset that I think is going to happen is the number 10 seeded Minnesota Wild defeating the number 7 seeded Vancouver Canucks. I think that's going to happen. Minnesota's underlying numbers, I'll give you my reasoning for it. Minnesota's underlying numbers are really, really good, whereas the opposite is true for Vancouver. Living in Vancouver myself, I do watch a lot of Canucks games when there's nothing else on TV. And the Canucks, they give up a shitload of shots and a shitload of prime scoring chances against, and they really just rely on Jacob Markstrom to bail them out every time. And I would be more inclined to believe that he could do so if Markstrom had any type of a playoff track record, but he doesn't. At 30 years old, he's never played in a single NHL playoff game. And that's mostly because he never played well enough to get his team into the playoffs. But the Canucks, they probably weren't going to make it this year either. The way that they were going before the season was paused due to the coronavirus. So they kind of got lucky with the timing of this whole pandemic as they were playing like shit and doing a nosedive right down the standings. So the pandemic and the resulting cancellation of the remainder of the regular season, it did come at a good time for the Canucks, as they likely wouldn't have had this opportunity to get into the playoffs otherwise. But anyways, I say that they will squander it, and the Wild will get into the Stanley Cup playoffs instead of them. I could also see the Chicago Blackhawks upsetting the Edmonton Oilers as well. Simply, because of the Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews experience factor. But I'll let you decide for yourself if that's a good bet or not. Anyways, that's all that we've got for you today, folks. Thank you all again so much for listening today. We're so happy to have you here. We're so happy to have hockey back. We're so happy to have training camps to talk about again and things really starting to happen again in the hockey world. It's very exciting times right now. If you're a hockey fan, which obviously you are because you're listening to our podcast. So, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you have not done so already. We are available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on iHeartRadio, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Podcast Addict. So pretty much anywhere and everywhere that you would get your podcast from, we are on there. So subscribe, share us with your friends and your family and any fellow Caps or hockey fans in general. And do leave us a review as well. If you feel so inclined, you can review us on almost any of the podcast platforms, or on our Facebook page as well. I always love reading your reviews, and I do read every single one of them. So keep them coming. And until next time, babes, stay classy, stay healthy, stay safe, wear a mask, take care of your fellow human beings. And as always, let's go Caps.